Okay, we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to be handing it over to Dr. Ryan Earl. If you guys can just look up at the screen for just a quick second. We are really grateful to have Dr. Ryan Earl with us here today. He has his PhD from Virginia Tech in Human Development and Marriage and Family Therapy. He's a staff therapist and a clinical lecturer of psychology and a member of the core faculty at the Family Institute of Northwestern. He's a consultant on something called integrated systemic therapy. He also has his specialties in providing therapy, and provides therapy to other therapists, to musicians, to athletes, and to teammates. And he has a special interest in video gaming, identity formation, emotional expression, intimacy, life stage transitions, social anxiety, relationship, empowerment, and accountability. So he's got I'm always amazed because he looks so young. I don't know how someone this young can have so much experience, but we were thrilled to get him, and when we told him the topic that we were interested in, he really said this is totally in his wheelhouse and is very interested to share his thoughts. So he's going to give a few words and then have some opportunity for Q&A. So without further ado, Dr. Ryan Earl.
Hi, I'm sure if I would have just gone and sat in one of the groups, you all might have thought I was one of the teenagers that was here to learn that my parents brought me here. So the first thing I want to say to all the teenagers that are here, if your parent is here, I want you to turn and look at them and say, just out loud in a big mess, thanks for bringing me here. All right? Parents, I want you to look for your child, and I want you to say, thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. So, I am delighted to be here. I sort of represent the middle of a sandwich of generations that are in this room to an extent. I'm 28, for those of you that are wondering. I can remember a time where I didn't have a cell phone and where the internet wasn't really a thing, yet at the same time, I barely remember that time. So I'm here to talk to you as a therapist, but also somebody who sort of writes academically and reads academic stuff about technology, but to talk about how to have conversations with each other around technology and kind of what that means for us. And so I want to say really quickly before I start doing that, for the teenagers that are in here, a lot of the stuff that I'm going to say, you might find yourself going like, yeah, I know that. Because this is one of those interesting dynamics where many of the younger people in this room are actually farther up the developmental growth curve than the parents are. And so I just ask, as another ground rule, be patient with your parents, okay? I'm on the side of both sides, and so I'm going to help have some conversations so that hopefully when you all walk out of here today, you feel like you can have good, empowered conversations in your family about technology in a way that your parents will feel comfortable and you will also feel like you're heard as teenagers, okay? So it's going to probably sound like I'm speaking more to the parents than I am to the teenagers, but keep your antenna up, all right? So what I want to say, first of all, is I just want you to think for a second. You just introduced yourself in a circle, right? And with people you mostly don't know, or maybe you're familiar with. But I want you to think just for 10 seconds here, how would it have been different if you had texted your introduction? Or if you had passed around your phone with your Facebook profile on it? Or had sent a snap to the group? What might have been different? What might have been different is that would have comprised more of your digital persona, which for some of us is more aligned with our in-person persona, and for others of us, it's actually quite different. And so that's a balance that oftentimes we don't think about in terms of our relationship to that digital persona and what we bring to a family. So I think all of you would agree it's why you're here. I give you a lot of kudos for being here. That technology absolutely impacts our relationships. I see it every day in my therapy room, whether people are coming in to talk about technology or not, that most of my teenage clients want to pull their phone out while their parents are talking, or the negotiations around technology are heated. How many of you would say within the last year you've had a heated conversation in your family about technology? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, it stirs up something in us, and I think it's because technology actually has a role in our families. It's sort of like another member of the family that all of us have various relationships to. Some of us feel more comfortable with that member of the family. Some of us are a little bit afraid of that member of the family and what that family member might do. But it causes and stirs up a lot in us. Okay, so I want to help us be able to have good conversations about this. A lot of times, the number one thing that people talk about with technology is how much or how little to use it. Okay, and I see some people nodding their heads, yeah, it's the bane of our existence. And there's actually a myth about that. A lot of parents now will say, oh, my teenager is just on technology, and I feel like we never have family time. If we only just didn't have technology, we'd hang out as a family. And actually, research shows it's not true. You'd just be doing other things. You'd either be outside, or you'd be hanging out with your friends, or you'd be driving around, or you go eat or whatnot, or the family might be sitting around watching TV while somebody else is reading. So technology actually has not affected the quantity of family time in the way that we think it does. But a lot of times for parents, because it's a new frontier, we tend to see it. I say we, I'm not a parent, but I work with so many parents, I feel like I'm part of the collective we. We see it as encroaching on our family time. And it does, but that's actually more about the conversations we have and the space that we make for it. So if you find yourself thinking, there's not enough time in my family because of technology, I'm here to kind of squash that thought. Also because parents are generally using technology too. All right, so I want to acknowledge that I would say, are there any parents in here that do not have a cell phone on them right now? That's what I thought. Okay.
I did leave mine in the car.
You did leave yours in the car. All right, awesome.
Is that an accident? By accident, you mean? No, I purposely.
Good. All right. Cool. I say I'm using mine to talk here. But okay. So, what tends to drive anxiety in families right now in terms of the generational gap around this is because the young people in this group are what we like to call digital natives, which is that this is a language that they just have grown up and used. So you might even think of it as being bilingual. Because at the time where, if you want to introduce people to a second language, you do it early because of where their brain development is. If you got technology early, like the young people, including myself in this room did, it's another language. So it's why we can usually fix the problem pretty quick with technology. It's why we get called upon frequently. In the same way that families where the children learn English have to call upon their children to help them out in public spaces. It kind of works the same way. And so that can cause anxiety for parents. So parents, I'm here to reduce your anxiety. And teens, I'm here to also reduce your anxiety because I'm going to help the parents out. I'm going to help you out. So, first I want to talk a little bit about the digital persona before I get into how we might talk about this and things to keep in mind. Okay, so some of you are either contemplating, when do I give my child a cell phone? Or how do I do it? What do I need to be mindful of? There's actually no right time to do it. So if you're waiting for me to say, okay, at 11 years, 6 months, and 2 days, give them their cell phone, it doesn't work that way. It's actually how it's developmentally appropriate for them. Some people at age 11 can handle the responsibility of a cell phone. You parents know your kids better than I do, for me to be able to tell you that. Others, maybe you gotta wait until you're 13 or 14. But when you get a phone, that's generally the start of your digital persona, okay, or if you're using the computer at home. And what that does, particularly if you do it too soon, is it creates a false persona. Because if I had asked you, if you all had texted each other before you got here or had been in an online group forum to get to know each other, you would have disclosed a lot more than you did in your circle here. And so that can actually cause some considerable anxiety because now all of a sudden in person we have to live up to what we've created digitally. And it's actually why Instagram is actually one of the #1 causes of anxiety amongst teenagers because that's all you see is what other people want you to see. And then what you put out there you have to live up to. And that can be really scary sometimes. I actually work with a lot of social anxiety and with teenagers, and technology is usually a source of that anxiety because it's way easier to have a planned response than it is to speak face to face. And parents, I know it can scare you with privacy. Right? What is my kid putting out there into the world? We tend to be more mindful of what it means in the big picture. and that can be scary. And teenagers usually roll their eyes and go, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a picture of me and my friends. All right? So we need a strategy to be able to talk about how these things integrate and how we can make sense of them in our families in a way that everybody feels like they're heard and understood and consistent. And so this part is where I'm going to speak more to the parents. Teens, I want you to keep your antenna up while I'm talking because you're probably going to agree with the things I'm saying. First, parents, it's your job. I tell this to all the parents that come into my therapy room, and they at varying levels of how much they like it, which is that it's your responsibility to get up the learning curve with technology because of the fact that it is kind of a native language for your kids. It's a part of, if you're not immersed in technology as a kid right now, you're isolated. And so most of us have to be involved in technology to some extent. Okay, so parents, it's our job to figure that out and to get up the learning curve on that. And so I'm going to help you do that very briefly with a couple major points from my clinical work that I think might be helpful. First, the persona that your kid is putting out into the world in technology is very real to them. Okay? And it represents for them a chance to differentiate themselves and to kind of explore their autonomy. So for a lot of kids, now getting their phone is their first shot at autonomy. It used to be when you got your car, right? And you have to drive around and you can do whatever you want. Now, this is the car. And so it's a chance to be able to step into who am I, separate of my family, how do I want to belong, where do I want to belong, what does that mean for me, and what you create on your snap streak, real important, okay? What your profile picture looks like, who you're putting yourself out there to be on not just social media, but also in video games and online environments is really important. It's something for us to get to know better rather than be adversarial to. Okay? Technology use is actually grounded in connection versus isolation. The absence of technology is generally where people feel isolated, particularly young people. Part of why, I lose $1,000. Okay, well, I can tell my friends about it, at least, and maybe we can find it. I lose my phone. Okay, well, I'm going to pay that. I'm going to use my $1,000 to buy a new phone. So it's very real. If we feel disconnected, and this is our primary means of connection with the outside world, it's going to cause considerable anxiety. Okay? And sometimes, and this is sort of the sadder part, sometimes this is a coping mechanism. Sometimes this is what we need to find connection when we don't feel like we have connection in our families. So it actually causes a feedback loop where if we don't feel connected in our families, sometimes we turn to this because this is where we can fill that gap. Okay? So that's why it's really, I think it's so cool that all of you are here wanting to facilitate better relationships with technology around this so that hopefully that doesn't happen. Okay? An important question, if there's nothing else, parents, that you hear me say right now, this is what I want you to take away from what I say, is ask not just what your child is doing online, but why are they doing it online? Okay? So a lot of times I'll see parents that are constantly saying, what are you doing on Instagram? What are you snapping to your friends? What are you doing? What are you playing? Instead of why? What's so important to you about this? Why is your snap streak so important with your friends? I was going to ask who has the longest snap streak in here, but I feel like that's probably, it'd take me too long. Okay? But why are these things important? A lot of times you might hear, if you would ask me this when I was a freshman in college, if you would have asked me why I played World of Warcraft 6 hours a day, I would have told you it's because I'm trying to avoid being depressed, and because I don't have any friends here, and because I miss my friends from home. And this is getting me through it. Okay? Rather than just, what are you playing for 6 hours a day? World of Warcraft. Oh, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Boom. Right? Conversation's over. Parent, you hear your kids say, I'm feeling kind of depressed and alone, and this is helping me get through it. That changes the conversation, right? So that's why the why is just as important as the what. Okay? And you got to recognize that you also have an online persona, and that your kids actually probably know it better than you do. And may use that as a way to have evidence for their claims. Okay. So that's for the parents. So we need a common strategy, we need a strategy because what most people try to do when they negotiate technology use in their families is actually counterintuitive. And that's actually shown by research. How many of you have heard of helicopter parenting? Okay? I'm not going to ask how many of you would say you have helicopter parents, or are helicopter parents, or want to be helicopter parents. But there's actually a new term that's being floated around, and I'll give credit to my colleague, Dr. Catherine Hertlein, for coining this term, of drone parenting. Which is now like the super advanced technological helicopter parent that sort of knows where to put the precision strikes, and you see it kind of hanging out there, but you know it's there, but you don't know where, and it's kind of freaky. The drone parents. Okay. Helicopter parenting or drone parenting is actually counterintuitive. So if you to your teenager trusting you and to mitigating technology use. So if you feel compelled to try and get involved in your child's technology use and really squeeze your way in there and try and find the back roads, you're actually going to cause more problems for yourself in the long term. In part because you're going to lose their trust, and because you're not understanding the why, you're looking at the what. Okay. So what's more important is your ability to attend to what developmentally is happening for your child in any given moment and what developmental need is being met. And teens in here, you got to be able to tell your parents when they ask those questions, because if I'm going to help encourage them to ask curiosity-based questions instead of getting on you for your technology use, you got to be able to meet them halfway. Okay, so you're in on this too. All right, and motivations for why you might cut technology use or why you might set boundaries need to be clear. Not just because sometimes what parents will do is they'll let their children use a lot of social media or a lot of technology because they themselves can then use technology. Parents, how many of you need to use technology in order to do your job? How many of you do it at home sometimes? Yeah, okay. So cutting technology is not just a one-way street, right? If we're going to have family conversations, we all have to be able to disconnect to the best of our abilities, and we have to be able to model that. It's not really fair to say, hey, put your phone away, but I need mine right now, okay? So we have to be able to see it as a two-way street. I said so, not cool. All right, so I went through the when and the why. So here's what you should talk about as a family. And parents, again, you have the task of leading these conversations. Just to say, we need to discuss privacy, boundaries, consequences, and what needs are being met by technology. I'm going to say that again. Privacy, that's the one parents tend to care about the most. Boundaries, which goes for everyone. Consequences, both positive and negative. We tend to talk about the negative consequences of technology. You're going to hear a lot about negative consequences today, but there are also positive consequences, which is that we can remain connected in ways we couldn't be connected before. And what needs are being met by the technology. I have my phone out because I have to do my work on it, right? I'm not checking Instagram, I'm doing work. I have to have my phone out because my friends are having this really cool conversation that if I'm left out of when I come to school tomorrow, I'm going to be I'm not going to know what's going on, and it's really important for me to understand. So what need is being met? All right, so how do we do this? The final part. Okay. How do we have these conversations? First of all, be careful not to be a drone. Parents, don't drone. Ask yourself whether you want to interfere with your child's development and autonomy, or do you want to promote it? Okay, what role do you want to have in their ability to explore outside relationships rather than just the family relationships? And we really seriously need to ask ourselves that question. And so if you want to be a catalyst for their development and autonomy and somebody they trust as they're exploring the outside world and outside relationships through technology, through their digital persona, you need to facilitate that trust. Show that you're somebody that can help set boundaries, will follow through, but also is flexible and understands that technology is useful. Right. Yeah. So understand the relationship that you have, that your child has with their technology. Teenagers, ask your parents what relationship they have with technology. Okay, we're in these groups right now. Ask each other, what's your relationship to technology like? Okay, what role does it play in your life? If you drone and you just kind of go behind their back and you're trying to or you just straight up cut out technology for no reason, that's actually going to foster resentment, secrecy, and risk-taking in the long term, which I know none of you really want, right? None of us want to engage in that, and certainly none of us want our children to engage in that. And so if you find yourself wanting to be a drone, that's what you can expect, and there's actually research that shows that. Okay. On the other hand, if we have these more useful conversations about the relationship and what needs are being met and why this matters to you, it actually fosters a sense of trust. And that if something goes haywire on social media or something really crazy happens, I feel comfortable coming to my parent and talking about it and trying to figure it out, as opposed to feeling like I have to do it myself, because if I try and bring it to their attention, they're just going to take it away from me. Okay. Parents and teens, talk about your anxiety as it relates to technology. It causes anxiety for different reasons, right? We need to be understanding of that. For me, technology causes anxiety. Well, I actually recently, it's funny that you mentioned the Facebook thing, I actually recently deleted my Facebook, which I feel like is actually not, it's actually not the most commonly used social media amongst people younger than I am. It's more of my age group's thing. Until our parents started to take it over. But it caused anxiety for me because I would start to see, people only doing well. I would start to see a lot of engagement photos, and my girlfriend started looking at me, and it caused some anxiety. You see people having children, and then your parents start looking at my sister saying, "When are you going to have kids?" It causes anxiety for people sometimes, and so we need to be able to talk about the anxiety that it causes. For parents, sometimes it's, who are you talking to? I'm worried that I don't know the people that you're talking to. Okay? I'm worried that what you're putting out there is going to bite you in the rear end later on. That's my anxiety. Have a conversation about anxiety instead of what you're anxious about. Okay? And create a dialogue that's weighed towards the positive consequences of technology, because it's not going away, that acknowledges that it has a positive role in our relationships. It's something we can use well, but also be mindful, and parents really being able to explain some of the negative consequences and how to be mindful of that as well. And if we're going to set boundaries around technology use, and you're going to learn through this presentation how to set boundaries with yourself and with each other around technology use, we have to be willing to follow through with them. Getting parents and getting families to set boundaries around technology use is pretty easy for me to do. Getting them to follow through with it is why they come and see me for 4 months. Okay? Because following through with boundaries is often hard. Okay? But see yourselves as allies in this endeavor while you're having conversations about technology instead of as adversaries. And I can't stress that enough, particularly from the parenting perspective. All right? Technology has a place in our lives. It's really useful for us to be able to connect. Sometimes it's easier to have hard conversations even with our parents over a text instead of face-to-face. But it plays a role. It fills needs for us, and we create a persona online that sort of pulls in some of our anxieties and kind of helps get us away. So, has a place. We need it. It's important. Boundary, privacy, consequences, needs. Okay, the 4 most important things we can have in mind when you're talking about technology. Okay, that's what I got. And I don't know if I have time for questions. I kind of went a little bit longer than you had anticipated, but I'll take a couple questions if you'd like about anything that, if you want me to tie up a loose end or anything that's kind of a burning question. Yeah?
You mentioned an important part about parents getting up to speed on technology. So what are some steps that you recommend us do with that? And in terms of the privacy for the teenagers, so we don't step on their toes when we're trying to get up to speed, like if we want to check and make sure everything's safe and okay with what they're doing.
Good question. So I think you have a couple resources. One is you can do some of your own legwork in terms of like going online and just sort of looking up how does Instagram work, or I'm 28, I still don't understand how Snapchat works. It's been on my phone for like 2 years, and I have no idea how to use it. You can look up some of that online in terms of like how does Snapchat work, what should I know about it, but also like young people are a great resource for that, right? So you can actually have a good conversation within your family of like, hey, when you're using Snapchat with your friends, can you just show me how it works? Like, I'm just curious, like, what you're doing. What is a snap streak? I keep going back to the snap streak, but how does this work? How are you using it? Can you show me just so that I understand, so that I don't have to keep asking you, right? But then also you have the opportunity within those conversations where they have a chance to kind of show you how they're using it to say, can I see what the privacy settings look like, and what does the app allow for and sort of explaining what's going on for you in terms of what you're worried about and how do we work together to make sure that this doesn't happen. So using your kids as a resource is a really big one, and it sort of shows that you're making an effort to understand. Does that make sense? Anybody else? Yeah?
So when you talk to teenagers and they say that, I have to have so many streaks to when I go back to school tomorrow, then I need to keep my streaks alive. And so when they start looking at that and really start feeling like I am popular because I have so many of these things, how do you talk to them to help them navigate the difference between their popularity through the social media versus the real life relationships?
That is a great question. So I think for one, it to some extent goes back to there's a need there, right? So if popularity is swelling on the digital front, then that actually can cause anxiety for your kid in the sense of like, okay, oh my gosh, when I go to school I have to live up to that, right? And so what's the need there with the snap streak? Well, if I lose this, I don't know how to compensate for that in person. I don't know how to be cool outside of my Snapchat persona, right? In which case, then we're having a conversation about, oh, like, what's that like for you to feel that way and to not be able to live up to that? And how might we make some of what's happening here on your digital front, like, how might we be able to do some more of that in person? So it seems like the reason your snap streaks are so long is because what you say is interesting or because you're putting yourself out there. Well, hey, let's talk about how maybe you could do that at school or what keeps you from doing that at school. So really figuring out again, what's the need there? Is there a need now to have a snap streak because of pressure or out of just, I just think it's cool, right? Those are two very different conversations, which is why us having that in mind, instead of looking at it as just Snapchat, a thing that I don't quite understand and that seems to be important, oh, it's actually doing something in terms of like my child being able to figure out who they are in a broader context rather than just in our family. If that makes sense. And so honestly, in my work as a therapist, having those conversations is really just creating the space for it. So a lot of times all I have to do is just have people come in and then just say, hey, talk about it, and then let's keep in mind what the need is, and it's very easy to have those conversations. It just feels insurmountable to some extent because a lot of times parents don't feel like they're far enough up the growth curve with understanding the technology, which is why it's so important. Leaves room for the other stuff.
So,
Cool.
thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for
let's
having
give
me.
a round of applause. Stay with us for the rest of the workshop, but we're going to continue our dialogue in our small groups, and Sammy's going to introduce the next phase of it, which is going to just be a very short 5-minute video from YouTube from an organization that we think will sort of tie right in with what Ryan was saying.
So next we'll be watching a video by Common Sense Media called The Truth About Technology. And while we're watching it, I'd like you guys all to consider, do these teams remind you of other teams here in Northbrook? And if so, in what ways?
And if you can't see the screen right now, why don't you move back to the center of the seating area, and then we'll move back to our workshop circles right after.